When does grieving begin? I think a lot of us get confused by grief. Number one, we think grief only has to do with death. And I teach that it doesn't. And I teach that all the time. But let's talk about when grieving begins, but more importantly, when someone is still here and we're grieving them. Let's talk about that. What if I told you the hardest part of grief that you will ever experience has nothing to do with death? What if I told you some of the hardest grieving experiences that you will have nothing to do with death? How many of y'all are married? There, that explains it. Being married is hard. How many of y'all have raised children? Raising children is hard. It's also a grieving experience. How many of y'all have raised teenagers? Girl, let me tell you. What if I told you that some of the deepest heartbreak comes from watching someone you love slowly disappear? Someone you love slowly disappear while they're still sitting right next to you, while they are still right in front of you. Most people understand grief after the funeral. Most people understand grief. They understand the grieving experience. They understand that it happens to somebody else. They understand it happens to those people down there. They understand grief after death. Most of us do. But few people understand the grief that happens when the person is still alive. You got a divorce. He moved on. You're still in love with him. You are still madly in love with him, and he is dating someone else. You got a divorce. You are still madly in love with him, and he got full custody of the children. And now you're having to navigate your life without your children. People understand grief with death and a funeral. They understand grief, life after the funeral. But very few people understand that grief that happens when someone is still alive. The divorce, the example I just gave you. The grief that comes with dementia and Alzheimer is really where I'm going right now. The grief that happens with dementia and Alzheimer's. Your person is still alive, yet they are slowly saying goodbye. The grief that comes when you watch a person, your spouse, your sibling, your friend, slowly become someone different. And we call that invisible grief. That grief is invisible. And because it's invisible, many people suffer alone. You can explain it. You can describe it. But that feeling that you're getting day in and day out, today I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about that for one main reason. Today is June 23rd, 2026. And on Sunday, June 21st, I moved my mother with Alzheimer into my home. Now, we work together as a family. There's 5 kids. We all work together. We all try to do our part. She's been with one sister. She's now come with me. And, I talked to her on the phone. She's the same old mom. My sister, I talked to my sister, just keeps saying she's different, but she hasn't really articulated the different. But I realized the different on Sunday in the car drive to my house. Grief begins before death. And one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have about grief is believing that it only starts when the person dies. There are 47 or more known losses that can cause a grieving experience in our heart. Death and divorce are the most popular that everybody talks about. Very few people talk about the death that happens, the grief that happens with Alzheimer's and dementia. Very few people talk about the grief that happens when the person is still alive. Grief begins the moment loss enters your story, loss enters your life, loss enters your story. Maybe it was a phone call. Maybe it was a diagnosis. Maybe it was the day they forgot where they put their keys. Maybe it was the day you found the check in the freezer. The minute that the loss enters your grief story is the moment that the grieving begins. Yes, I've been grieving for a while. Yes, I was involved in part of her getting the diagnosis, but I think I'm going to explain this to you from my heart. I think what's happening is that I did my same thing. I went into protection mode. I went into being strong. But now that loss is right here in my house, under my roof. The first time, the first moment that you realize there's a change and the loss starts to happen, that's the grief, friends. That's the grief. That's the grief that you're feeling. The first time you realize there's a loss is when you get the diagnosis. And then you ride that out for a while. This is what happened. We rode it out. We had all these things to do along the way to get her set up, to get her ready. And we rode that out for a while. But every time there's a change, you drop. Every one of these drops is grief. Every one of the drops is a grieving experience. And then you ride that out. And this is what becomes your norm now. And each time the grief is going to follow you. Each time the grief is going to follow you. It doesn't go away. It's not just a moment in time. Many people don't allow themselves to acknowledge that they're actually in a grieving experience. Here's the deal for me. I knew the grief was coming. I knew it was coming. But because she wasn't under my roof, because she wasn't here, I was just able to stay in front of it. But that grief has arrived at my front door. Look, the pain is already here the moment you get the diagnosis because the loss begins. The ball started rolling. The next drop that she has is going to be the next grieving experience, and that's grief. And then you ride it out. There are multiple opportunities on a journey like this for you to grieve your person. So here's my question to you. When was the first time you realized life was never going back to the way it was? When was the first time that you realized life was never going back to the way it was? Grief begins when loss enters the room, when loss enters your story. Dementia creates thousands of losses. Most losses happen all at once. Most losses happen all at once. I lost Austin in an instant. I lost Sharon in an instant. Dementia happens over and over and over again. It happens over and over and over again. You lose a piece of the person each time. You lose conversations. You lose memories. You lose the traditions that you guys used to do together. You lose parts of the relationship. And every loss creates another wave of grief. One day they remember. The next day they don't. One day they seem like themselves, and the next day they're different. She's very quiet right now. She's very quiet. She's in a new place. She's trying to gather her surroundings. She's really quiet. This, my friends, is exhausting. This is exhausting because your heart is trying to catch up and help you understand. It's exhausting. What part of the loss has been the hardest one for you to accept? What part of the loss has been the hardest one for you to accept? For me right now, it's the memories. And it's not the big memories because she has some of those still. It's the, where did this come from? Oh, that's the pin you asked me to put in there. I've never seen this before. It's that. It's that. It's that over and over again. Look at here. Dementia creates thousands of small goodbyes. Look, I put dementia, But what if your person got amnesia? What if your person never came back? What if they have permanent brain damage? What if they have Alzheimer's? It all falls right here. Dementia creates thousands of small goodbyes. Every time you have to say goodbye to who she is, every time she drops, every time he drops, you are saying goodbye to that thing. Because what happens here is loss. If she got up and came to the kitchen every morning for breakfast, but she no longer can do it, and you have to bring her the breakfast to the room, her not going to the kitchen any longer is a loss. It's a loss. The grief nobody sees. People are seeing caregiving. They're seeing appointments. People are seeing you do the medication. They're seeing you be responsible. But what they don't see is the grief. They see you stepping up and doing it, and you talking about how tired you are and how exhausting it is. In the beginning, we would laugh as sisters and brothers. We would laugh. We're like, guess what she said? Oh, she lost her glasses. Ha, ha, ha. That shit ain't funny no more. What people don't see is the grief. They don't see the tears after everyone leaves. They don't see the fear that you're feeling. They don't see the sadness. They don't see the emotional exhaustion. This type of grief is often lonely because it's invisible to other people, and because you yourself haven't identified it as grief. You're identifying it as caregiving, as being in the caregiving. What part of grief do you think no one is seeing? What part of your grief is no one seeing? What part of your grief as being the caretaker is no one seeing? Invisible grief is still grief. Invisible grief is still real grief. It's still real. Every single time there's a drop, this grief is real. It's real in your heart. It's real in your life. It's real in your grief story. So many grievers come up to me and tell me, I'm guilty. They tell me this every single day. She left me. I'm guilty. And we get guilty for feeling frustrated. We get guilty for feeling tired. We're guilty because we want to break. We feel guilty because we're missing the one that we loved. That one that was there, she's no longer there. I'm going to be honest with you. For the most part, the woman that I always call mom, she's still here for the most part. And I don't know how fast this is going to happen, but it is happening. And the truth is simple. You can love someone deeply and you can still be struggling big time. You can love them deeply and still be struggling big time. You can be grateful and still be grieving at the same time. You can be a compassionate caregiver and still be exhausted at the same time. Those two things and those multiple things can all coexist on this grief healing journey, this journey that you are on. You can feel all the things, and it doesn't have to be guilt. And here's the other thing, you don't have to be left with regret. Talk to her, talk to him. Exhaustion doesn't mean you love them less. Blank page. Skipped a page. Just because you're exhausted, it doesn't mean you love them less. Look, you've got to understand that all of these things can coexist. You can be frustrated and still be grieving. You can be tired and still be grieving. You can want to break and still be grieving and still be their caregiver. You can be struggling deeply and still be a good caregiver and still be struggling. You could be grateful that you have them and still be grieving. Just because you're tired doesn't mean you love them less. It means you're damn tired. That doesn't mean you own guilt. Guilt is with intent to deceive or do harm. You are not guilty because you want a break. Friends, a lot of us are grieving the future that we will never see with our person. I know for a fact that I'm grieving the loss from my dad, from him not seeing my grandchildren. Most people think that grief is about the past and about the person that they lost and doing the funeral. And for many of us, it's about the future. Future conversations that we never got a chance to have. Future conversations that we won't have. Future memories we won't make together. Future holidays that won't look the same way that you always imagine them. Part of your grief is mourning the future that you expected. The future you thought was coming. The future you thought was yours. The future you thought you deserved. The future that changed without your permission. What future are you struggling to let go of? What future you, with her, with him, are you struggling to let go of? Grief 100% mourns. It mourns what could have been. Grief mourns what could have been. We long for things that could have been. Absolutely 100%. 100%. Your job is to stay present. Anticipatory grief is constantly pulling your mind into the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? How about the worst? What will happen? How will this be? What am I going to lose next? I don't think I can do this without her. While your mind is living in tomorrow, your life is happening today. Your job is to stay in those moments. Be still in those moments. Be still in the memories. Girl, we still got something to do. She's still here. We still have to love her. We still have to make connections with her. You know what our challenge is? Our challenge is going to be learning how to stay present every single day. Learning how to stay present every single day. And this is why having support matters. One of the hardest parts of grief is feeling misunderstood. And that's why I put together the Grief Story Room. It's every Tuesday at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we can come together and talk about our grief. If you're actively grieving somebody, you can come to the room. If your person has already died, you can come to the room. If your loss is due to divorce, you can come to the room. If it's because you lost your job or your fur baby, you can come to the room. You have a grief story. What is your grief story that you're willing to tell, that you need to talk about? The moments that you're missing can become huge because you're concentrating on what's coming next and all of the future you won't have. Courage in grief is staying in the present moment. Courage in grief is you staying in the present moment. It's imperative for you as a griever to stay present. It's you staying present while your heart is breaking every single day. It's you staying present. Moving my mother into my home reminded me something important. Grief doesn't wait on death. Grief arrives the moment the loss arrives. And sometimes the deepest grief you'll ever experience in your life is watching the person you love slowly change while they're still here. If that's where you are today, I want you to know I see you. I want you to know I am you. I want you to know your grief is real. I want you to know sadness is real. Your exhaustion is real. My heart to yours, friend. I have no idea what this feels like for you, but I do know what this grief feels like for me, and it totally sucks. It totally sucks. Thank you, friends. I'll see you in the next video.